live stream with me, and today I've got my friend George. Let's equalize the sizes of the faces. I didn't realize. There we go. Good to see you, George, always. So let me do a quick intro. I'm Khalid, I'm a Muslim, and I normally do happiness classes, and I want to explain or show the benefits of Islam to all people, even if they're not Muslim. That's my quick intro, and I do a lot of happiness classes in Speakers Corner normally, but I'm doing a lot of live streams now. And I've got my friend George, who's a Christian. He's an Arab, which is I love Arabs too much, man. They're just such lovely, generous people. And the funny thing I like to, uh, I say funny, but I think very intelligent, open-mindedness thing of George is that he believes in Prophet Muhammad while being a Christian. So um, people say, "Oh, therefore he's not a Christian," and I think those people, especially Muslims, who say that, they've got the wrong attitude. It's like just people. If he's open-minded enough to believe that, why make that a problem? But anyway, that's a quick intro. Do you want to add something about yourself, George?
I would just say that the me being an Arab is debatable. If you've
Oh,
watched some of
really?
my other videos, yeah, but we'll get
He's
into that another
Lebanese.
time.
I do debate that you're Lebanese.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't debate that. You're okay with being
I'm
called Lebanese.
Lebanese. It's just whether Lebanese people are Arabs. That's the hot point.
Oh, okay. All right, fine. Let's leave that one because I'm not talking about that today. But as always, very good to see you. And let's just get started. So, what we talking about the danger of feeling faiths. Okay, and I'm gonna lump transgenderism, Buddhism, and Christianity together. So George is a Christian, so I'm sure he would have something to say about that. And so I want to give you a brief overview of what I want to discuss, and that is, first of all, what are the dangers of feeling faith, including what are feeling faiths? Then, why most religions are feeling faiths, and then why Islam is not a feeling faith, including the miracles which people think are outside the realms of science. And a lot of Muslims, I would say most Muslims, as far as I know, get this wrong about miracles as well. So it's going to be interesting for Muslims as well. So let's just get started. I want to kind of when I say get started, I mean, let's explain a few of the basic things. Like, what do I mean by feeling faith? And this is something that I think is becoming increasingly popularized in the West, which sees itself as very logical, but it's amazing how illogical we are. So basically, people have come to some weird conclusion. Even I was talking to a Christian yesterday that science and religion are in separate realms. They do not interact. So therefore, you can't really be logical in religion. And I think that's an incredibly dangerous thing. And that makes, that's why atheists just like make fun of religious people so much, right? Because it's like you avoid all logic in religion. How can you just believe this stuff? And they're right. And so, what's the danger of feeling faiths? You have lots of well, as soon as you throw out logic, then you're just Pandora's box of can of worms, whatever phrase you want, man. You just got so much trouble, and you do get so much trouble. Um, I would say this, some of the basic ones are like the pedophile priests and monks. I'm going to put them together since we're talking about Christianity and um, Buddhism. Now, people, I'm glad what's happened with the Dalai Lama. Him being exposed to the pedophile, asking a young boy to suck his tongue on camera, has come up. But it's not news to me at all. It's been a long-standing problem that people are scared to keep their children near Buddhist monks. Now, this is not like surprising for me. It's logical that if you tell, and I'm just touching on the problems with um, faith without logic or reason, right? Um, there's, both priests and monks think it's cool or good not to be in a sexual relationship, a long-standing sexual relationship, to be celibate, right? What's going to happen? You're gonna That's a lie. Everybody has a basic needs, and then you're gonna prey on, like, because you're gonna pretend to keep up your faith, ideological beliefs that you're not supposed to have sex, but you need to. Then you're gonna prey on poor little kids. It's gonna happen, right? Or helpless women. I don't know, rape them or something. So that's a brief introduction to the dangers of feeling faiths. And then the last thing I want to say as part of that introduction is, how am I saying Christianity has led to transgenderism? Because this is, when I talk about the dangers of feeling faith, I think it's becoming more and more obvious in our day. In the past, it was less obvious. You just feel something and you weren't causing so much harm. But now it's become more and more obvious with transgenderism, the confusion and the self-harm, where transgenderism is very much a... I'm going to go into it in a bit more detail afterwards. I'm going to give George a chance to talk, but I just want to finish this kind of initial idea of what we're talking about. So transgenderism is based on this idea that your feelings are true. Okay, the idea, they say this thing is becoming more common through transgenderism. This is my truth. Like, you might decide today I'm a helicopter because I identify as a helicopter or something, or 1+1 = 10, whatever, right? That's my truth. No. And where do they get this idea of my truth? Because I feel it, therefore it's true. Okay. And where did this all start? I think it started from, or I would say, I don't know about starting whatever, but I would say Christianity being such a dominant religion in the past, and saying things like, St. Paul said, you just have to have faith and you don't have to follow the law. That whole thing, because you can't analyze if you're following the faith or not, became a feeling faith. It's like, I follow the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is telling me this. This is what Christians say most of the time, right? So that opened the door to removing logic from faith. And then Buddhism came in. Now, I'm talking about Western Buddhism, because if you think chronologically, Buddhism came before Christianity, but Buddhism became popular in the West afterwards. And Buddhism also started saying all sorts of crazy stuff that made zero sense, like everything is the universe, everything is God, and they just chant to God. At the same time, they say that there is no God, right? So if everything is God, that means a rock is God, and like people might even say, what's wrong with rock being God? Well, you need, you know, God must be intelligent to make us, and there's a rock intelligence. I'm not even going to go into that, but we'll go into that a bit more detail in a bit. And then that opened the doors to transgenderism, which is a feeling faith personified. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's nothing else to it. You cannot bring any logic to it. So sorry for that really long introduction. Go for it, George. Any thoughts?
I think we need to be careful not to always link everything back to religion. While religion affects most things, I wouldn't say that, at least in the groups I'm with. I don't know what other group. I can only talk from my experience, but my churches, my Christian friends, I'm pretty sure that, especially the ones in Lebanon, when I go back home, they're all anti this transgenderism movement, right? What I feel like is this is originating from America, which is starting to become a predominantly atheist country. The UK has officially got more atheists than Christians. So, if anything, I blame atheism and this liberal left wing technological social media types that are pushing this down, ramming this down our throats. Hollywood's eye as well. I can't watch a Hollywood movie now without some sort of female love, male love. They're just every single. It's ridiculous. I mean, and what's even more weird, I just read recently, something like 30% of American students now identify as bisexual. when that was like less than 10% a few years back. How do people suddenly become more gay, right? If we are led, if we have to believe what we're led to believe, which is you can't control this, it's just something. So are you telling me that a third of the population were always secretly gay, but they're only now comfortable? No, the truth is that you can confuse people and tell them they need to believe a certain thing, because that's what sexuality is. Obviously there's going to be people that can't be influenced, but there's a lot of people that can be, and this is the danger. We need to tell the truth, and the truth is the majority of people who have these sexual issues, transgenderism or other issues, have been abused as children, and that's the truth. That's the facts, and it has nothing to do with religion.
Okay, so I agree that there are other forces as well, the individualism, where you can say you can whatever I believe is true sort of thing. This is sort of individualism is creates sort of narcissism where like people think whatever they think is true. Do you know what I mean? This um that's true, right? But it wouldn't be possible without opening the doors to this idea that faith can be devoid of logic, right? That's the danger thing. And so and I kind of want to backtrack a little bit and say, why am I bothering talking about this? Because people think some of their beliefs are harmless, that it doesn't matter if I just say the Holy Spirit is telling me this, but I can't prove anything. That when I say, let me backtrack even tiny bit more. When I say to demonstrate in one question why Christianity is a feeling faith, is can you prove to me that God was a white man, Jesus, right? It's the same problem with, you know, when I exclude Hinduism, I just lump Hinduism with Buddhism, by the way. Can you prove to me God was a blue man in Hinduism, right? That kind of stuff, right? We have to be able to prove our beliefs. And when we open the doors to not allowing that, and because Christianity was such a big force and so influential in the past, it made it acceptable to say that religion and science are separate things. And when you have those separate situations, you just open the doors to Pandora's box of can of worms and all that kind of stuff. So yes, I agree that Christianity is not solely responsible for it. There are lots of traditional Christians, more so in the Middle East, right? But I talked to another, say, transitioning family, let's say, where the son, who's only like 14 years old, he's outdoing in terms of logic his own parents and converting his own parents to who are one actually only the mother's left as a Christian, right? The father's become an atheist, right? That's the transition that you're seeing in England all the time, everybody becoming atheist, right? And they cannot argue with him with his beliefs, because the beliefs of Christians has become that people should be able to do anything and they don't really follow the Bible. So it's a long transition. I mean, you probably have this experience, George. I don't know if you know, in London especially, Christians don't follow the Bible. They just say, and that's St. Paul's fault that they don't follow the Bible, because St. Paul, you said just the law is a curse. So immediately you get bang, the whole Bible's gone, right? Practically.
But was he talking about the law of the land or the law in the Bible?
The law in the Bible. That's what I mean. Sorry, thanks for clarifying that, right? So the Bible's gone. Like he was talking about the law. He said the law is a curse. Like you don't have to. I mean, that's what I'm sure. I'll be shocked if you say, because nobody cares about the law of the land when you're talking about religion, right? Yeah, it's the law. I mean, do you agree? We're talking about the law of the
I mean, if
Bible.
that's what Paul said, then I mean,
I
again,
thought you
I don't
knew
know
that.
why we listen to Paul, why we listen to a man who's come after the actual prophet. This is the problem with all religions, though. The same as in Islam. So you got Sunni, Shia, everyone's making up their version of the religion, and
Hmm.
it causes problems.
Hmm. So Duck Buck You're asking who am I speaking to? I'm speaking to George, a friend of mine from Speaker's Corner. He's a Christian and believes Prophet Muhammad is a prophet. That's my very short intro to repeat the beginning. Yes, people shouldn't, but I 100% agree with you, George, that people shouldn't be listening to Saint Paul. I don't really even like to say Saint Paul because he completely disrespected Jesus. By Jesus spent his whole life, he literally said, I've only come here to complete the law, to follow the law. That's what you should be doing, he told his followers. And then he goes away. I don't want to say dies necessarily because I've got a whole different story of what happened to Jesus after the cross. And then Paul, who never met Jesus, tells everybody he has a vision and tells everybody everything that Jesus said in the Bible wrong, because Jesus told me in a vision that everything he said during his life, you have to do the opposite. Like, that's the most insane thing I've ever heard, and Christians follow it.
Where have you got this from, though? This is the first I've ever heard of it.
Are you kidding me?
Honestly, I've
Okay,
never heard of it.
which bit of it did you not hear? Have you heard of Saint Paul, right?
Yeah, I know he's the one
And
that was struck. He went blind because he used to persecute Christians, right? And then that's what I know.
and he had a vision on the road to Damascus. You know that one? And
Yeah, yeah.
he supposedly met Jesus
I didn't know. I didn't know that bit.
in the vision, right? Okay, so that's what everybody follows. Why do people not follow the law in the Bible anymore? Why do Christians not
But
follow the
what? Give me
Bible?
an example, because I grew up as a Roman Catholic, and then I read the Bible, and I don't see any conflict.
Okay, so
There's additional rules, yeah, which weren't there in the Bible, like you have to go to church and all this malarkey. But
okay,
there's nothing that actually contradicts anything in the Bible.
okay. So what I'm talking about is why do Christians not eat? Why do Christians eat pork? Why do they not fast during Lent?
Well,
You know,
Jesus never told us we can't eat pork.
he said he's only here to complete the law, and in the Bible you're not supposed to eat pork. You must know that.
You mean in the Old Testament?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
that's the Old Testament.
All right, okay. So Jesus was a Jewish prophet,
Yeah,
right? So, and then he would teach the Old Testament because the Old Testament is Judaism.
yeah, but I remember we've had this talk about how all these new prophets come and they interpret God's message as best as they can, and then that was the new version. It's the evolution. This is why I'm saying we should get rid. We moved on from the Old Testament and the New Testament. That's why my Bible is only the New Testament. I don't even look at the Old Testament. The Old Testament's just like for nostalgic history. It's not. It's not to do to because there's a lot of things in the Old Testament that are quite radical.
Yeah,
And
like it's okay to kill a slave as long as it takes
yeah,
more than 2 days.
yeah, and we can't be following that stuff. Come on,
Okay,
those are
good. I'm glad you agree. Yeah, but there are some good things in there as well. Like people might be shocked circumcision is actually good for your health and things like that. But yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know if you.
I'm anti-circumcision as well. Actually,
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
been circumcised, and I think you should give every child their own choice, especially because if your child is really religious and well behaved and only sleeps with one woman, he doesn't need to worry about catching all these STIs by being uncircumcised.
That's true, but we've only found out one of the benefits so far of circumcision. That's what I'm saying. So, like you're correct that one of the benefits of circumcision is that you catch less sexually transmitted diseases, right? But that's who said that's the only. That's as far as science has told us so far, right? We don't know what other benefits. So the point is, God told us thousands of years ago, literally, right? Okay, and we've only realized now, so that tells us the wisdom behind God's teachings, and we shouldn't just reject them just because we don't understand all of the benefits. Anyway, so where do I want to go with this? I want to say, okay, so we might disagree, but there's a lot of Christians who don't follow the Bible. You don't follow the Old Testament and things like that. Okay. So if I wanted to summarize or clarify, okay, let's ask you the question. How do you know God was a white man?
We know God wasn't a white man. He probably looked like me, like something similar to
Oh,
my.
you're not white enough. Okay, yeah. I mean, you're kind of white. Okay, which.
Well, that's because everyone at the time where he was born, where his ancestry was, you
No,
know.
okay, fine. I understand Jesus. I can understand Jesus existed. What
Yeah,
I mean to say, how can we prove Jesus was God?
that's the thing. I remember I don't believe Jesus was God.
All right,
And
okay.
my last point on that, I will say this, right? A lot of people say that doesn't make me Christian.
Yeah.
Christian means follower of Jesus. I follow the New Testament and the messages that they say Jesus said and did, right? That is what I follow. That makes me a Christian. This belief that you have to believe Jesus is God, this just comes from religions. I'm still a Christian. Christian just means follower of Jesus. I follow Jesus. Just because I
Mm.
don't believe he's God does not mean I'm not his follower.
Well,
So
Jesus said there's only one God, that's the Father. So you're follow. So I would agree, you're the best kind of Christian because you actually
exactly.
just
If
listen to
anything, I'm
Jesus.
the only Christian, and they're all fake
Yeah.
Christian.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. Because they believe in a Trinity, and Jesus
Or
did
I've
not believe in a
explained
Trinity.
the Trinity to you as well, if you remember.
Oh man, no, don't do that. We did that before, man. Okay. So and Jesus, like Jesus, I just told you, Jesus didn't believe in the Trinity. He said only the Father is God, right? So,
In my Trinity, only the Holy Spirit is God, and the Father is the prophets, and the Son is Jesus. Or
oh,
Muhammad.
okay. Maybe that's why I didn't understand. That means you're Muslim already, then. All right. Okay. But we just got different terminology, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's why I was so confused. It's like when the day you explained it on that park bench, whatever, or that coffee bench, whatever it was. Anyway, um, okay. So I want to start whizzing through more of the stuff. So there's dangers of so I said Christianity led to open the doors to even more crazy ideas like Western Buddhism. And I want to clarify again, I believe Buddha was a prophet of God, but what you hear today in Buddhism is nothing to do with what Buddha taught. There's even a web page called Real Buddhist Quotes, and in that web page, it tells you most quotes you see on the internet are not from Buddha, right? And you can tell a Buddhist quote, real Buddhist quote, because they're far more complicated. Western made up ones are like, yeah, sounds good. Don't do anything for anybody. Just take care of yourself, kind of rubbish, right? Okay, that's just it's just an extension of selfishness from the Western world, right? And it's like trying to blame it on Buddha, right? So I wanted to say that by opening the doors of removing science and logic from faith, you can open a whole can of worms. And now you can see in transgenderism where people are taking really powerful drugs to sterilize themselves, to like massively they've got so many physical problems, like even people know that if you have too much sugar or coffee, that's going to be bad for you. Imagine taking tons of crazy drugs.
It's
Yeah,
really messed up,
you're gonna
especially
be
for those
messed.
children. It's child abuse.
It is 100% child abuse, and there's thousands of people filing lawsuits on these places, like I think the Tavistock Clinic in London that had to close down, which did all this child abuse surgeries. You know, people just unaware of like the bad effects of it. Okay, so I don't make these videos just because there's nothing else to do. This is a really sad situation. I'm sure my children won't go through this because they're protected by for some sort of firm ideas of how the world works, right? That you can't just be a man or a woman just because you feel like it, right? But that's where it's gone to, and I'm going to talk about more about transgenderism now, I think. So let me break down why I believe transgenderism is a faith, right? I don't think you've ever have you ever seen a transgenderism protest? Because I've seen two of them
I,
in
I
Speaker's
walked past.
Corner.
Remember when I was going to speak at school, and I walked past all these trans people.
Right, so you've seen one of them, okay? Okay, and anybody who's seen them will see it's like a faith, right? Because they believe it wholeheartedly and they don't like anybody arguing with it. Okay. They make state, I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but they make so much noise because they don't want to hear the other people's opinions, right? I mean, did you know that?
I mean, I saw how they seem, yeah, very like ignorant, and like they don't want to, be open and listen to any other views, easily
Right.
offended. That usually shows that wherever your argument is, it's weak.
Yeah, that's right. So just for people who haven't seen them, right? They've probably seen videos where they're just screaming and crying and things like that without argument. That's one thing you see on videos. But when they come to Speaker's Corner, they come especially to stop normal women talking against transgenderism. So they surround those normal women. The police have to come, especially more police than you ever see at Speaker's Corner normally, right? They surround them and they make loads of noise so nobody can hear what the normal women are saying. And these are even lesbian, I say normal women, just like people who don't believe in transitioning into something else, right? But they're even lesbians, I think, some of them, right? And then when you ask to talk to them, I tried to talk to them, lots of other YouTubers try to talk to them, they come with umbrellas to block the cameras. So
That's what.
and when I asked one of them without a camera, I said, "Why don't we have a discussion?" He says, "I'm we're right already, so why have a discussion?" Right? So there's a circular belief, and that feels like, if anything, feels like a religion in the wrong sense. It's like they 100% believe in it, they have 100% faith in it, but they cannot support it. That feels like a religion. If anything, feels like a religion. And again, so where do their religion is based on a sort of narcissism. It's just my feelings are my truth, that sort of thing. And just to why it has this, I agree with your earlier statement about this is partly due to, or largely due to, individualism of today. Is because when you're self-centered, what happens is, um your in short, your ego becomes really brittle,
Yeah,
because psychologists say to be happy you have to be other centered, you have to be doing things for other people,
I agree.
right? And so when you're self-centered, and this is not hating on transgender people, I mean, I know people who are not transgender who are individualistic and have the same problem, right? Okay, they feel like if you say something against their beliefs, you're saying something against them. And because they're brittle, their ego is so brittle, they can't hear anything against their beliefs. So that comes out as a sort of narcissism, isn't it? It's like everything's about me. You can't say anything against my beliefs. And where do my beliefs come from? My feelings. So that's transgenderism for me in a nutshell. How what do you have you got any other feelings or statements about transgenderism
Yeah, I
on the
agree.
rise?
It's like a religion. Look, at the end of the day, all humans need a system of values to make decisions. Without it, you'll be totally lost, right? So when people topple religion, they got a new value system, and they cling on to, like you say, individualism or this trans movement, something to make that'll give them this value hierarchy that they're lacking. The problem is everything other than religion is changing. Our laws are constantly changing. You know, one minute it's illegal to abort kids, which is rightfully so. Now suddenly you're allowed to abort kids. I don't know why this future generations have become more and more dislinked from God, and religion has become disgusting, like with all their laws and rules. It's always changing. This is called chaos.
I
Commandments are in rock. It's a
Yeah,
value system that we can stick to and can build our societies on. These are our values, and they're chaos. They're constantly changing.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because people think they can make up their own rules. It's actually basically impossible to make up your own rules for a whole bunch of reasons. One, a simple way of explaining it is that as soon as you don't say there's a bedrock of God says so, right, and you're going to try to define a law, I would challenge anybody to disprove. And okay, let me clarify before I say this, right? I'm against pedophilia, right? But you cannot prove pedophilia is wrong.
You can't. You're
You
right.
can't,
100% right.
because if a child says I want it and an adult says they want it, they're gonna say it's right, right? Now you can disprove it to some extent. You can say
Yeah.
there's harm, there's mental
But yeah,
harm, and you can use that.
the organs aren't ready yet.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You can give all sorts of reasons, but you cannot completely disprove it. You can just say there's more harm than good. You probably shouldn't do it. But then they might say, who cares about harm? Right.
That's the next dangerous stone. Now that they've pushed over transgenderism on top of us, the next big thing they're gonna come after is making us accept pedophilia.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought this up, because people think transgenderism is where it stops. This is just part of the whole story, and it started, um you could say, with Christianity, and then Christianity opened the doors part wrongfully by ignoring the Bible, okay, on homosexuality. So, oh, homosexuality is okay, and
Again, that
it just gets worse.
no Middle Eastern Christians. We've not opened that door.
Yeah, I would say because they're closer to God, and the reason partly is because they're closer to Islam as well. They mingle with the Muslims there, so they haven't let those basic beliefs go yet. Um, yeah, so I'm glad you brought, because people don't seem to realize what's happening. They don't seem to see ahead. They don't even seem to see what's in front of them. So exactly, pedophilia is next. What else is next? Murdering people. Actually, murdering people is going to become more normal because euthanasia is already becoming acceptable,
Who knows?
right?
Eating people? Who knows, man? These
Eating
people
people, yeah, why not? Why not? What's it's just food, right? People are
in
just food.
science, I don't see there nothing wrong with it in science like this.
Yeah, right. So you really can't disprove anything. And also there's many other reasons why you need God to be good, right? Like, only God knows you as that's kind of like the base thing, you know what I mean? Like, you cannot define anything as good by yourself anyway. But there's so many beautiful benefits of believing in God. Like, God is your creator, your designer. Who else would know what's good for you? And by the way, the Quran says that God didn't just make things randomly sinful and blessings. What's the word? Good, basically, right? It's that whatever God says is good for you, good is good for you. Whatever God says is bad for you, right? That's how these things are defined, right? So yeah, go on.
I just bring up my whole point that I think God acted through Muhammad, but it's not literally God's word. It's the best interpretation, and that's why I think with pigs, for example, it's okay to eat them. Just you just gotta be careful because yes, they do come with like tapeworm and stuff, and it has to be cooked really well. But that doesn't mean you can't eat.
So this is, I mean, I suppose you're giving an example of a teaching in Islam, which was also a teaching in the Bible in the past. I mean, did you know that you're not
Yeah,
supposed
in
to?
the Old Testament, that's why also the Old Testament's all about, you have to eat the certain food has to be kosher, right?
Yeah, exactly. And which are basically, kosher is a Judaic kind of halal, but it's a lot more strict. Um, but yeah, I would say even nowadays, who's got the equipment to make sure, what's it called? The pig is cooked properly to the right standards is actually quite difficult. So yeah, so this is like a religion that makes life easy for everybody and tells you what's good and bad for everybody with ease.
But it's not a sin though. This is where I think we have to that I think and I don't know if Islam does this, but I
Yeah,
think we need to separate a sin and something that can harm you, and then there's three things. There's a sin,
yeah.
there's something that can cause harm to you, and there's something that could cause harm to others. So let me explain that. I don't think drinking alcohol is a sin. However, drinking too much can harm you, right? I've done this in my part. There's things I regret when I'm drunk. It makes you more likely to harm others. You're more likely to sin. And so if you get drunk and you just fall asleep and don't do anything, there's no sin generated then. If you get drunk and then go and start, assaulting other people, you're now sinning and it puts you at a higher risk. But drinking alcohol in itself is not a sin, in my opinion, anyway.
Right.
It just can cause you to sin more.
Hmm. Okay. So I'm just thinking about the direction of this thing. I mean, this is, I suppose I did talk about what is sin and what is not. So let's quickly touch on it. So you talked about alcohol and you agreed that alcohol is dangerous. And really the question is, when before somebody starts drinking alcohol, do they decide that they're going to beat their wife or abuse their children, because sexual abuse of children is common because
Yeah,
of
yeah.
alcohol,
No, yeah, I
right?
don't think they
Okay.
do.
They don't plan on smashing their faces somewhere or beating somebody out, but that's what happens. See, so you cannot say that, what will happen. And one third of accident and emergency, in the UK is caused due to alcohol. That's a massive waste of money, and a lot of, just besides money, just emotional damage to all the people involved, including themselves. People are ruining their lives completely, you know so Islam, like, if you had a father who wanted to give you advice, your dad, right? And he's forward thinking, because not all fathers are that forward thinking or intelligent, right? Okay, so God is that father, is in effect. People, Muslims don't like using that word, but I'm happy with that word, right? As long as you don't think you literally is your father, right? um then that father figure is saying what's good for you, and don't drink. And actually, I don't feel the need to drink. I would say I don't want to drink because it becomes a crutch, because people become dependent on drinking to socialize. I'm like,
I,
I'm happy without the drink.
I
I'm
agree
glad I
with
don't
you.
drink.
I agree with you there, but I'm just saying the act of drinking is not a sin in my eyes anyway. And most people drink. The majority of people, they drink safely and then nothing happens of it. They just get more jolly, whatever. They use it safely. There's just a few people that are causing those A&E problems. There's people that should be banned from drinking.
Yeah. Oh, can you see the comments coming? I'll
Yeah,
just
I see what he's saying. You don't need it.
Alika, me and my wife were talking about you. Alika's a Christian friend who's been trolling me right from the beginning, and we were like missing you because Harry's taken over and trolling me, right? But it's good trolling. I don't mind. It's good troll. Like, you don't need Islam. You need to stop drinking alcohol by your own will. So what Islam? You know what? I even tell people, don't even, if you don't become Muslim, at least learn some of the benefits, right? I'm don't drink alcohol, and I'm talking about these things, right? But you know what Islam does? Islam normalizes good behavior. If people didn't drink alcohol and they realize they're all brothers and sisters and things like that, then they wouldn't need the alcohol in the first place. I feel really sad that people, need a crutch. Do you know what I mean? Don't take. I just, like I said, don't take any drugs if you can avoid them, right?
Uh,
Don't use the drugs to get happy, because then you become dependent on that. It's really sad that you don't develop the real social skills. So there's this 100 reasons why you shouldn't drink alcohol, and Islam says it in such a fascinating way. Where in the Quran it says, yeah, sure, you know what, there's some good things about alcohol, but the bad things about it far outweigh the good, right? So yeah, sure, there might be some good things about it, but the damage it causes, and like sexual abuse of children, is one of the,
these
it
are
makes
rare,
it
rare
possible.
cases, though. These are rare cases. I think the sexual
Mm,
abuse would still happen even without alcohol. I don't think you can blame her. That's that individual deep down him already wants to do that because all alcohol does is it's a disinhibitor. It stops your inhibitions, right? Which is a
right.
natural part of your brain. But if you have these problems, if you have these weird thoughts, you shouldn't even be messing around with any type of drug, really. But look,
Yeah.
remember, I'm not a fan of drinking either. I agree with that comment said. Look, I'm not Muslim, and I stay away from drinking. I'm not totally. I do still have an occasional drink with the friends, whatever. But I mostly stay away from it because my mind is a temple. I want to keep it drug free, even though I'm being forced right now to take drugs that inhibit me because I'm naturally God made me born as a very energetic, happy individual, like really high individual.
Yeah.
A natural. I'm like a a natural person always on cocaine, but that's just natural highs. That's how good.
Yeah, you should be on natural highs. Natural
What's wrong
highs are
with that?
good.
What's
That
wrong with that?
we shouldn't be miserable like typical British people.
Exactly.
That's not a standard.
But I stick out like a sore thumb in the UK because everyone's all miserable. Everyone's
Yeah,
all
that's
different.
why me and you should both move to the Middle East quick time,
God
inshallah, God
willing, God
willing.
willing.
Yeah. Yeah. So Alika, I like your comment, I always mostly I like your comments because it usually brings up a is this the second? No, it's the same one. So uh why people drink alcohol? I don't want to go into too much because I kind of want to keep moving on with the rest of it. But um the reason why most people drink alcohol or used to drink alcohol because actually becoming less popular actually, well, I'm glad in the UK, it's just because it was like normal, it was a social norm, just drinking alcohol, right? And then I want to make it not a social norm. So if I can, let's say me, Islam can make it less of a social norm and then other people copy without becoming Muslim, great. Okay, but you have to realize how psychology works. People try to fit in, right? That's actually known thing about in psychology, that most people prefer to be with the group, the normal group, be normal, than even if it means suffering. They prefer to suffer than stand out. So uh, Islam's just trying to create new norms like Islam teaches, like Christianity and Jesus would have taught, right? That when you come across somebody, don't blank them, don't ignore them, don't avoid eye contact, smile and say, peace be upon you. Jesus said, peace be upon you as well, when he said he would have said, Shalom Aleichem, right? And Muslims say, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, right? So these are all these social norms that I just want to bring, right? You don't become a Muslim, fine, okay, but benefit from some of these beautiful teachings. That's what I'm saying, right? Yeah. Okay, so what else have I got on this list? Let's get through past Christianity, Buddhism, right? Again, for a long time, Buddhism is kind of in some ways gone under the radar. It's like, it's just a little peaceful religion. No, it's not. Okay, there's so many violent Buddhists right around the world, but they don't show the Myanmar monks and all this kind of stuff, right? Um, Decades of persecution from the Sinhalese Buddhists against the Tamil Tigers, right? Decades of raping and all this kind of stuff. Everybody keeps asking about you, man. The faith of our guest is Christian. He's a Christian from Lebanon. You should just put your crosses on your face or something. I don't know, like everybody can know. There you go, evidence, right? Anyway,
I guess I
so
do look like a Muslim, though.
yeah, I don't, because you're most of the way there. That's why. Okay. So yeah. Okay, so how do you know? I like to try to make things really simple about how dangerous Buddhism is. So while Islam is projected to grow by 70% by 2060, Buddhism is projected to grow by -7% growth. That means basically it's the fastest. If you go to Pew Research, it's the fastest dying religion. So it's even worse than if you didn't have a religion, right? So people who don't have a religion, they're doing much better. Okay, being stupid by yourself, which is what's happening in the West at the moment, is even though it's really harmful and the West is dying through population implosion and loads of social problems and confusion, is better than being a Buddhist. And that might surprise you. And the reason why it will surprise you is because you've had so much Buddhism propaganda. Okay, and we say, oh, Buddhism propaganda. Why would the West support Buddhism? Right? Okay. People might know a tiny bit of history of the Dalai Lama, right? So he was good friends with, I forgot now, the guy who was running China. China said, you can have Tibet, we will leave you alone. Okay, but then he wasn't happy with the amount of power he had, right? And this is the worst kind of civil war you can possibly have. He made a deal, and this is not even secret. You can just Google, check this up on YouTube, right? Nobody even debates this, right? He said he got his Buddhist monks to be terrorists to fight against the Chinese, but before he did that, he left the country. and he went to China, and the CIA paid for it. And this is not a conspiracy theory, right? And
America's not
thousands,
doing everything as usual.
right? And he got millions of pounds every year to support him, right? Okay, and this is not secret information. People don't debate this information, right? But you don't hear it. Okay, so it's just to get rid of this kind of wonderful story that Buddhism is the, you know, the religion of happiness. But you get that they're plastered everywhere, all over the place. So it's the most dangerous religion in terms of the fruit, the you know, the results. Like their population is dying out. Well, with Muslims, their population is growing twice as fast as second place, which is Christianity, right? So that people say, oh, just because it's popular doesn't mean anything. Actually, it does mean something. It demonstrates the ideas work. That because the ideas make sense, it's keeping families together. Whereas that's not the norm. The norm is families are breaking apart all the time, and the norm is families are not having children. Where Muslim families are having children because their families are so strong, because their values make sense, right?
Could I give a
Buddhism is
counter
the exact
argument?
opposite. Go on, counter argument. Yeah.
Some might say that, and I disagree with this, by the way, but some might say that as the economies develop, there's less need for children. And so I could say maybe there's more third world Islamic countries than there is compared to Christians, which are predominantly in the West.
Okay, so Elon Musk, who's an industrialist, right? He says the most dangerous thing we're facing in the world is population implosion. So he doesn't agree that we've got enough robots and whatever to take over yet. Do you know what I mean? If we had the right,
It's sad to even think that. We shouldn't measure humans based on how much productivity they can give us. It's disgusting.
no, but no,
I
to
think we should
support.
continue to grow populations, and every family should
Oh yeah,
want as many kids as they want, and they shouldn't be affected by socioeconomic. It should be the government's priority to make sure that those children are well fed, well educated, and well sheltered.
yeah, and they can,
And they
yeah.
can, they just choose not to. I mean, we got the Gulf countries showing how it's done properly.
Yeah, and we know they can for all sorts of statistics. Like, for example, more people die from obesity than hunger, right? So that demonstrates if you just distributed the wealth a bit better, right? And then, like, I think 0.1% of the population has the wealth of like 50% of the rest of the population, or something like this. I failed to keep up with the
Yeah, yeah.
ridiculous statistics,
It's all
but
hoarded in one place. Yeah.
yeah, it's absolutely nuts, right? Okay, and then you could also, like, people don't even know that. I think 95% of the population lives on 0.5% of the world mass, like space of the world, because they all live in cities, right? So also ridiculous things that are completely unnecessary, right? And so I've just put a leaker's comment, which is in the same sort of thing where population growth is not a measure of success, right? So I think it is, like we demonstrate. I kind of said that we need more children. It demonstrates that your values are working, right? And there are population is not the only way you can demonstrate your success. Like, okay, if you're not feeling like committing suicide, which has become the number one way for people to kill themselves for young men to kill themselves, and it would be more so young women, but young women just are not good at killing themselves. I don't know if I've talked about this with you. One of my friends, let's say, um, basically the mum, a business lady of one of the parents of my children, let's say, one of the parents, yeah, not completely wrong, completely wrong. One of the parents of my students, that's correct. So I've known them for over 10 years, tried to kill herself twice, right? Okay, so but she couldn't because she's a woman and she didn't know how to get the job done, sort of thing, right? It's just not brutal enough. Men are methodical, you know, we are. Yeah. So, like the last time, she looked so drunk that some man stopped her. Basically, she's like, "What's wrong with you?" and took her to one side, and she couldn't stop the man from stopping her from killing herself, right? Stuff like that. So anyway, so the point is, there are many other ways other than just population growth. I'm not saying Islam's growth in children is the only way it demonstrates its benefits, right? I would say all sorts of mental health problems are solved by wearing more clothes. We talked about this before. From psychological evidence, being modest, especially women being modest, it protects them from the negative effects of social media, which makes young girls feel suicidal. Again, there's so much information, so much support of the teachings of Islam and of past religions like Christianity if they followed the Old Testament, for example. Anyway, so and then she says you have India, China. Okay, so now she's making up facts, right? So she goes, yeah, China have probably the biggest problem with population. Okay, but you know what? Maybe she's not purposely making up facts, because people are still 10 years behind in their statistics when they still think that there's too much population. I talked to a guy 2 weeks ago, and he kept on saying Google it. It's like, okay, I Googled it loads of times.
I think her point is that they have huge populations, but they have huge poverty rates as well.
Right. Okay. So we kind of talked about that as well, because it's unnecessary that there's poverty. So that the fact that there's poverty is a separate thing. But I'll tell you something I find really interesting. I find, generally speaking, and this is not like the super extremes, but generally speaking, wherever I've met poorer people, they're much happier than the rich people, even in places where they're rich and poor in the same country. So like Jordan, I feel like the people who are super rich, they close themselves in their gated mansions and they don't talk to their
They still
neighbors.
have society and community in those places. That's what's missing in the Western world.
Yeah, but even in happier countries like Jordan, where I hope to move, right? The poorer people seem to be smiling a lot more because they're talking to each other more, because they don't have live, streamed videos and stuff that they can distract themselves, so they don't have to talk to their neighbors. And they also have money problems. I know, so the rich have money problems because they're always fighting over, inheritance and stuff like that, which is, I don't want to go in, but I know of, let's say, firsthand, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, right? You probably, let's not go
I'm
into that.
planning my fire as we speak.
Exactly, right. I was like, let's not go into personal stuff too much, but like, this is so poorer people, just because they're poorer people doesn't mean they're less happy. They're probably more happy, right? Some of the best times I've had are mostly with poorer people. So anyway, but thanks for your comment though. Appreciate it, Alika. I think you made some good points. Anyway, so Buddhism, dangerous religion. Okay, I kind of go a high level thing, but like the Dalai Lama is shown to be a pedophile, the monks are pedophile. But the real thing that demonstrates how dangerous the religion is its teachings, right? They seem, just like atheism seems harmless at first, but if you think about it, it's so dangerous. So I'm trying to get the names of their basic teachings. What does it say? First, all these noble truths that they have, right? They've got these 8 noble truths, and the first noble truth, okay, is life is suffering, okay, and suffering is got from attachment to people. Basically, by loving people, being nice to people, being nice. Do you know what I mean? This is perfect for. I don't think that's the original teachings of Buddha, right? Okay, because all prophets of God were always, actually, when I say I don't think, I studied it a little bit more, and if you go into him, he's all about being of service to other people. But uh you know this idea of like, oh, life is suffering, that's typical, that is so because when atheists find life incredibly difficult, including people like Jordan Peterson, who he always says he's not sure if he's half about believing in God, but he says he acts if he believes in God. No, you gotta believe in God.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in here. I hear this
Yeah.
from Jordan Peterson a lot, where it's just like, life is suffering, life is tough. It's almost like we gotta accept it and get on with it. I don't agree with this. And let me just tell you my own personal experience. I go through periods of like feeling like crap, hating life, being stuck in some depressive cycle. And then as soon as I find God again, mentally and spiritually, everything is great. Nothing changed on the outside. I've still got the same problems. I've still got, if anything, my problems get worse. But I'm happy in myself because when you truly believe in God, when you truly see every part of you believes in God, you can't not be happy.
100%. I love your. I feel like your input is sometimes just much better than mine. You just get to the point, man. I love it, right? It's so true. The Quran says the same things, that hearts can find comfort in the remembrance of God. And that the whole God perspective changes everything. Like when you realize God is there, you know that there are no accidents, just the illusion that there are accidents, coincidences, and things like that. Everything is taken care of. You just have to follow the plan. And
I don't agree with you there.
yeah, okay, I'll probably exaggerate. You do have to follow, like God gives you guidance as to what to do, and you have to follow that guidance. But you,
But it's your choice. It's your choice.
oh
So
yeah, sure,
accidents, we shouldn't blame God. This is because I met a Christian
yeah.
once in my school. She's like, I'm struggling with my Christianity. I was like, why? She's like, my friend just died. How can this happen? That's not God's fault. That is just random coincidence. God has created a world that has randomness in it. Things happen. That is
I don't
nothing
think
to do
it's
with God.
random. Like people, okay. First of all, if you're a believer in God and somebody dies, right? Then and yeah. If somebody dies, we know that's just a transition. It's not the end anyway, right? I
Yeah,
know it's
yeah.
painful, but it's a transition. That makes it easier. Okay. And then for me, it's definitely not random. There's always something to learn. I always talk to people myself. We've had a death in the family recently and stuff like that. There's something to learn always, you know. I don't think, and I've noticed that there are no accidents. I don't think there's any
I think
randomness.
that's a dangerous thing to think. If we say everything is caused by God, it's almost like a way of saying to yourself, "Oh, I have no responsibility."
Okay,
Whatever
so
I do,
yeah,
it's a dangerous way to think. I do not agree. I genuinely think that while God knows everything that's going to happen, He's given us choice, and it's our choices that matter. And our choices impact whether I get in that car today or not. It's going to determine whether someone dies or not. It's all coincidences. It's all probabilities, and
I think we're kind of agreeing and disagreeing because of the subtlety of the difference. So what I mean by that is that I agree that we have free choice. God has put us on this planet to see if we behave well, right? Okay, but the way I would describe it is that God is gives us a sort of in a sort of programmer's term. I'm not sure if it's a well-known term. It's sand. What's the word? Sand pits and basically sandbox. That's what have you heard of the phrase sandbox? It's like
yeah,
what
it's like
programmers.
it's like a small program, right? It's got like a defined area.
Yeah. So basically, you've there's limits to what you can do, right? So we have freedom of choice, and because of our small brains, we think we can do anything, right? Which we can do within
Yeah,
our we
as a collective,
no, we can't fly, whatever. We can't.
we will be able to one day. That's what you
Okay.
mean by fly.
Yeah, I meant like flapping our arms sort of thing. But I'm just trying to give an idea of like um God's higher awareness makes it really easy for God to predict what we're going to do. Not that he controls what we're going to do. I don't want to get into too much detail about destiny and stuff like that because that would be a bit of a sidetrack, right? But I'm just saying we can agree to disagree, but I think we mostly agree that God is all powerful. He does give us freedom to do whatever we want, but I would say from my experience, like there's like very limited choices, or yeah, I think there's a whole different long discussion. Not that I can't really explain it, but it's like, yeah, God's higher awareness. Like if there's a child and the child thinks he's going to do anything, but because you're an adult, you can predict roughly what the child is going to do. Is going to do A, B, or C sort of thing, and and you need to be able to predict what the crazy child is going to do. Otherwise, they're probably going to harm themselves, and otherwise you'll be standing up like, oh my god, what's the child going to do? But you're relaxed because you know child is going to do. You know what I mean? You put the babies baby gate there, the child is
Yeah,
going to, yeah,
I think I know what you're saying. I think
yeah,
God is the ultimate predictor, but all that being said, there is still freedom of choice, and God isn't to blame. God, it's not God's fault if you just have a heart attack now. It's probably because you weren't exercising and eating well. You
yeah.
know, these are the we can't take away our choices. And are we not going to talk about Moses parting the waters?
Yes, come on, let's get on to it, right?
Diving
So
into this stuff.
yeah, exactly. So the last thing we want to talk about is Islam a feeling faith, and I'm going to break that into two parts. Basically explaining how Islam in one or two sentences how it's not, and then the thing that George rightly pointed out, there's these miracles which seem to break all logic and science, so that's definitely an area we should talk about. And I think that's going to be fascinating because Ahmadi Muslims, we think we are the revival of true religion, and we're bringing back logic into all of these things, including miracles. So very quickly, how is Islam not a feeling faith? It talks about the Big Bang. It talks about water is in every living thing. These are all things that are found out recently and people had no idea about. Even talks about like the age of Earth is 2 days out of the six, two periods, I should say, out of the 6 periods to create the universe. So it's kind of similar to Christianity, except for if you look at the description in Christianity of the Bible of the 6 days, they'd have a sunrise and a sunset and all sorts of stuff that doesn't make sense. It sounds like a 24-hour day. And it has the earth in the first, right, as the first thing being made. And we know from science, if you follow science, if you believe in science to some extent, you know the earth was not the first thing to be made. So anyway, so first of all, Islam is massively scientific. It's crazy how many scientific ideas it has are completely true, and it has no mistakes. Where the Bible has loads of mistakes. It's like some guy called I can't remember what his name is, some king called Azia or something. They say on one part of the Bible it says he's 22, another part of the Bible is 42. So on one side is massively scientific, the Quran, and the other side is zero mistakes. Nobody's being able to spot one mistake in the Bible. Do you want to say anything about that first before I move on to the miracles?
The only thing I would say is it's not right to base Islam came after Christianity, so it had hundreds of years of technological developments. If I was to write my Bible today and create a new religion, it would be more it would have much more technological advancements than the Quran. That doesn't mean that it's somehow greater or more worthy.
Do you know when we found out about the Big Bang?
Now, okay, I see what you're saying, and that it was predicting the future, but I could put in things now in mind that will only be discovered in the future, such as the internet communicating with our minds.
You know, if you made a book, okay, and you hundreds of pages long and loads of scientific facts, the chances are in the future will disprove at least one of your scientific facts, right? If you just made it up.
Yeah, but
So
isn't there a few in the look? I haven't read the Quran, but I heard there's something about the moon splitting and
okay,
all
let's do the miracles now. So I'll just say there's nobody's found a mistake in the Quran yet. But anyway, but you know that's an open challenge. The Quran actually gives that as a challenge. Okay, like look, that's one evidence that is true. But anyway, let's do the miracles because that's fun. Let's start with Mary's, and I'm going to focus on some two. Yeah, I'm going to talk about two shared miracles between the Abrahamic faiths, and then I'll talk about one. Well, I could talk about two, I suppose, of just based on Islam, but one, Mary's virgin birth. So, as this is only Ahmadi Muslims, the revival true Islam or second coming, metaphorical second coming of Jesus followers, whatever. Um, and I believe that Mary was a hermaphrodite. Ever heard of that?
yeah, two
Yeah,
separate organs.
right, exactly right. And so there have been some reports of that in humans, but it's far more common in animals, right? So they can
That can
sometimes give
happen.
birth and they can, sorry, say again?
Humans are also born as hermaphrodites.
Yeah, so sorry, let me correct what you're saying. I mean, sorry, correct what I said because you're right, yeah? So there's loads of hermaphrodites, right? The fact that they've given birth using the both sexual organs is disputed because it's not clearly recorded. There's some people who have been
I don't
recorded,
think
but
that would work genetically either.
there could be problems if it was. No, I agree with that. Generally, human beings don't, you know, reproduce that way, and there are benefits of mixing genetics to overcome environmental problems. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah,
makes you more flexible. So I agree, and that's why it's not normal, right? Okay, but it's possible. And all I'm saying is this is one way. This is not a definite way, but this is one way of showing what could have happened in the case of the Virgin Mary, Jesus' mother. Um, and it's not uncommon in the animal world. So it's possible that they can actually switch between sexual reproduction and what you might call asexual reproduction, like through their own two bisexual organs, whatever you want to call it, right? So it's just an idea. Bees do that, for example. Komodo dragons do it sometimes, and they can choose between them, or choose, or it switches between. Any thoughts about that, first of all?
I'm not disproving it. I think it's unlikely, though. I think much more likely, and even though it might be a taboo to say it, I think Mary was raped, and Joseph, being a good man, as it says in the Bible, took her under his wing because he had a vision, didn't he? Got told to. So
I
maybe
don't know actually why, but yeah, he was a nice man to take somebody else's child. Yeah,
I think he might have had a vision, like a dream angel came to him, was like, you need to look after this woman. I'm not sure, maybe not. But
yeah,
regardless, he took her on. He probably knew what had happened to her and was like, he probably knew obviously the taboos, it's gonna be hard for her to get a man, because obviously most men want virgin women, understandably so. And so he did the great thing of taking her under his wing and becoming her husband, even after she'd been violated. I think that's the most likely thing that had happened there.
yeah. I mean, I think what you're saying is reasonable in the absence of any other sort of scientific evidence. Do you know what I mean? Right. So that's very reasonable, and I think people should just say whatever they think is reasonable. Um, and I think it's a sort of insult. I should maybe backtrack as to why Ahmadi Muslims even bother come consider having scientific ideas, scientific reasoning as to why certain miracles happens, because it's an insult to God, who didn't have the foresight to realize certain things needed to be done, that he had to break his own rules. Okay, and not only is it an insult, if you start saying I saw a pig fly, for example, and God can make pigs fly because God can make anything happen, then we will never be able to distinguish between fact and fiction. You would have a lot of problems. People, like I say, people don't really think through their ideas too much, and then they go, "Oh, anything's possible. God can do anything." And you hear Muslims say this a lot as well, right? But then you open up a whole massive can of worms, and nobody can take religion seriously if you start believing those things are possible, right? That first one is, there's evidence that it's possible, but yeah, let's move on to the second one. Maybe I think I want to move on to the one about Prophet Muhammad, and you pointed this out, flying to Jerusalem, and then there's another part where he flies to heaven as well and meets lots of um, ex-prophets of God. I mean, not ex-prophets of God, past prophets of God and stuff like that. But very quickly, how we know it was a dream and he didn't actually fly. And by the way, you're correct that most Muslims think he flew, right? It's because Prophet Muhammad, in that scenario, let's say, went to the Al Aqsa Mosque, right? That mosque didn't exist at that time. It came after the Prophet's death. So it's not possible that it literally happened, and people, most Muslims don't know that, right? Most Muslims don't know the timeline of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, right? So they blindly follow whatever they're told, and they like to believe in myths. They believe in a lot of crazy myths, right? That don't make any sense, right? But and the sad thing is they ruin those dreams because those dreams are not pointless. Okay, so for example, in that dream, because it's not, I just proved that it's not literal, right? Okay, um, all the prophets of the past worship prayed. What, I talked about this the other day, and I think Claire, who joined my other live stream, is not as spiritual as maybe you are. So maybe you'd understand this, because I asked her the same question and she couldn't come up with, I think, anything near a good answer, right? And that's not an insult to her. I think she's great in her own ways, but I don't think she's very spiritual. um, there's part of that dream is that all the prophets of the past prayed behind Prophet Muhammad in Al-Aqsa Mosque. What do you think? I'm interested. What do you think is the value of this dream that all the prophets of the past are praying behind Prophet Muhammad?
I think
Any
I think
interpretation?
the symbolism of that is that they're accepting him as the next person in line of the prophet. He's he's evolved that message further. You're in a mosque at the front would be the I wish
Imam?
imam, and
Yeah.
everyone else would be praying behind him. So it's just symbolism to just say that he's accepted as the next prophet in line.
Okay. And what about, I agree with that, but I want to develop it a bit more. What about the idea of all the prophets? I mean, you might not agree with the dream, but if the dream was actually happened, what do you think the value of all the prophets, not just some other prophet or Prophet Abraham or something, but
Just
all the
shows
prophets?
the lineage. They've all come to accept him as part of the next part of the story development. Which, like I say, I believe Muhammad is part of the Abrahamic religions.
Hmm. So would you say, if I said that all the prophets praying behind him, not just certain prophet, demonstrates that all of humanity, all the other religions were going to unite in this universal religion?
Yeah, you could also look at it. The way I look at it is, if you are able to convert all the other Muslim sects to your Ahmadi Islam, and I'm able to push all the Christians into my view of Christianity, we'd live in a much more peaceful world, wouldn't we?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because the other Muslims, besides believing a lot of myths, and even then, it's the fastest growing religion, despite some of the crazy ideas they have, right? Because it's far beyond anything else out there at the moment. Yeah, I agree that, and they accept violence as well. They think violence is okay,
We
and
see
that's what.
what certain interpretations causes. We got ISIS, we had 9/11, right? And I think America's the biggest terrorist. So I'm not. Some of what they did, I'm not saying it's justified, but I understand after they've been terrorized. But even still, their interpretation is extreme and just wrong.
Yeah, and their interpretation is really weird. Like when us Ahmadi Muslims say love for all, hatred for none, people are like, what? Other Muslims are like, are you serious? I get comments like, how can you say that, right? And I say, in the Quran it says Prophet Muhammad said, what God said to Prophet Muhammad, you are a mercy to all people, not just Muslims. So merciful means loving, I think. Would you agree? To be merciful is to be loving, right? Not hateful or willing to kill
Yeah,
people.
merciful is being balanced with your
Yeah.
judgment of
So
it.
even when I say love, it doesn't mean that. So I still believe, for example, that, and you disagree with it, but like some harsh laws, like chopping people's hands
Yeah,
off. But
I
that's a
disagree.
you disagree, but can you see that it's a kind of tough love to stop people? But can you see? You might not agree with it, but can you see there is a thing called tough love? It doesn't mean you hate somebody.
Yeah, but I think those things like those rules are what's empowering these ISIL types.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I kind of feel like, anyway, so
Can we talk about Moses?
Yeah, let's talk about Moses. So very interesting. That I'm glad you just get back on track. So Moses splitting the sea, how could that possibly be scientific? So if you go to the Hebrew, and again you can Google this, right? And most people's knowledge of reality is usually wrong, right? So the place that, or the river that was crossed by Moses is not the Red Sea. If you translate it, it's called the Sea of Reeds. Ever heard of that?
Oh no, that's new. Very interesting.
Right, so that's actually a narrower path. So people are debating where that Sea of Reeds exactly is, but a lot of agreement is on something slightly further up from the Red Sea, where it meets the Sinai desert, where Moses took his followers, right? Okay, and so Sea of Reeds, basically there's lots of stuff growing there. He's like what's a marshy sort of area, right? And so it's actually much lower. And you can have dry spots, and even Napoleon's army went through the same place and almost drowned. So they went through when it was dry, as far as I understand, but because of the windy conditions, and people think, how can wind affect the height of the water levels? It can, in when it's relatively low. So you might say, how can low water um kill anybody? It's because it's something called, as far as I from my studies, something called a storm surge. So what happens is, just to, and I asked Claire this, and she can imagine this, but it's like, if you have a bottle of water, or let's say an empty bottle of water, and you pour water in really fast, have you ever noticed that the water goes up first and then it goes back to its level?
Yeah,
Right, that's the sort of storm surge sort of thing, right? So the water is kept back because of some windy conditions, whatever, but not just because of the windy conditions, but because of land and lots of other material that's keeping the water back. Okay, where so you're able to walk through for a while, and then when that water comes rushing back in, it doesn't go back to just that low level, but high enough.
yeah,
And if anybody's seen a flood, even if the water's not as high as you, water is incredibly powerful. It's like a very heavy thing. 1 cubic meter is a ton, right? It's
yeah.
powerful stuff, but we underestimate it, right? So water comes rushing in, destroys Pharaoh and his army, and Moses gets through, and it's a very narrow path, by the way. So just did the job. Anyway, what are your thoughts about that?
So, and this is for any viewers, I really need you to concentrate on this, right?
Yeah,
So God always works in science. Every miracle has to be scientific. Any miracle that has no basis in science, e.g., Jesus turning water into wine, did not happen. It simply does not happen. Everything is based in reality of science. Moses is a true story. Now, the storm surge scenario Khalid is mentioning is possible. I've heard that there was an earthquake that caused the water to recede, but again, the actual method could be any of those two. It doesn't
agreed.
really matter which one it was.
Yeah,
What matters is why is it a miracle? It's a miracle because God communicated to Moses to make sure he was at that point at that time, because God knew that the waters were going to go down at a certain time. So he made sure by communicating to Moses. This is why we call these people prophets, because God directly communicated to them to get to that point. And Moses was sitting around like confused, like, what can I do? The army's coming, I can't move. And then suddenly the waters receded, they crossed, and then when the armies tried to chase after them, they got hit and drowned. Right? Because God knew this was going to happen because He's the master predictor. Just how like now we can predict weather. Like 500 years ago, if you told someone, "Oh, I can predict the weather for the next 14 days, which day is going to rain, which day is going to be sunny, which day is going to be snow, the temperature," they'll be like, "That's impossible. You must be some God." But we can do it now. So what the things God can do are out of our imagination because He's so powerful. He's the master predictor. He's more powerful than any AI. So he knew that was going to happen, and he communicated to Moses to make sure he was there at that time. That's how the miracle happened.
mashallah, as we Muslims say. What does that mean exactly? Translate.
Which one? Sorry.
MashaAllah.
I think it means I hope to God or something like that. I
Yeah,
think.
basically, we Muslims say it when we think somebody said something good or something done some done some achieved something good. And I do feel that throughout this whole discussion, Allah, God is inspiring you because you explain things so well, and I
I
totally agree
appreciate.
with what you just said. You know, and people might go, "Oh, but he's a Christian and you're a Muslim." It's like, no, God is all our fathers. All God wants all of us to be led the right way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
and I think like if we got to think about it, if God sent the prophets like say Jesus and before him Abraham and so on, he was saving all those people. He doesn't. God doesn't suddenly like decide, oh, these old rules are no longer relevant, right? Like God sent his prophets. He was happy with how they then decided to live their lives. When things started getting weird again, he sent new prophets. And so I personally think that almost all of these major Abrahamic religions, as long as people are truly following the faith and being good people, they will end up in heaven. Well, it doesn't matter what label you've got. It's just a different way to worship the same God, but you're all still worshiping one God.
yeah, I agree. So a lot of Muslims, I don't want to get into this a whole different video, but like they think, only Muslims go to heaven, and some Christians say that same sort of thing, which is not true because the Quran says if you're a good person, God will reward you with the best of whatever you've done. Stuff like that. Yeah. So anyway, always a great chat with you. Just so you know, because of this live stream thing, when we end the stream, we can still chat away afterwards. But last words, George. What are your last words or summaries?
Just
I'm not sure.
keep the faith, brothers and sisters, keep the faith. These are difficult times. We are the most challenged in maybe hundreds of years because we're attacked by constant propaganda through our phones, through the TVs, through our peers now as people becoming more and more atheists. Just keep the faith, your reward will be in the afterlife.
Actually, what George has said is very exactly in line with the teachings of Islam, because this is supposed to be, according to us Ahmadi Muslims, the last phase of humanity when the Antichrist, or the Dajjal in Arabic, who's the Dajjal means basically the great deceiver, and basically that's the Western powers who pretend to be Christian, but actually they're anti-Christian because they teach the opposite of Jesus' teaching. They teach St. Paul's teaching, which is anti Jesus. And they're going around the world, and there's so many prophecy relating to that. But they basically, in short, he's supposed to be the greatest manifestation of Satan, or he, as in these people, are the greatest manifestation of Satan that we will face. And then once we overcome that, we will have a more like paradise kind of lifestyle until we basically and then after that we will finally destroy ourselves, but we will have a good time after we overcome this last challenge as a great challenge. So totally agree with you. I think George has got a lot of, let's say, spiritual insight because he listens to his inner truth. It sounds like I'm kind of backtracking and saying your feelings are truth, but you have to balance that with logic. um and I feel like maybe I don't want to go into too much, but we mentioned the hermaphrodites, and you can be both sexes, right? But that's a very small minority. And we were talking about you cannot pretend if you're a man, you're a woman. I'm talking about if you're literally a man and you're not a hermaphrodite, which is 99.9999% of people. You can't just decide you're a woman. It's going to
Yeah.
be really bad for you, basically, because we're built differently.
Yeah, I think hermaphrodites are probably the only people that get a pass on deciding which one they are because they are technically born with both.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, great talking to you. Peace be upon you. Um, and that's it, really.